Geoff Mosher from Philly Voice and the Inside the Birds podcast is with me right now for another edition of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Mosh, what's up, buddy?
Mike, how you doing? It's a day of losses for the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, a scouting member, Britton Covey.
Yes.
Now with the Rams, so it's a rough day.
Yeah, I saw your article is actually the one that jumped out to me, the first that I saw, that another member of the front office is leaving. And this has happened the last couple of years for Philadelphia. Right after the draft, you see these front office members start to get plucked a little bit here. So give us some insight here. This is, as you dub, Howie Roseman's, quote, right-hand man, Anthony Patch. He is leaving to go to the Raiders. Now, if anybody watched Unscripted, you would see how important guys like this are to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I want to address, I don't know if it's a misconception, but already I see a lot of responses to what I put out, the story that's on Twitter, and people or X, and people are saying, it's just another quote-unquote right-hand man that Howie Roseman is losing. He seems to lose one every few years, and they've done just fine. And listen, there's no reason to hit a panic button. You're right. Howie Roseman is the shot caller. He makes the call. He's the one who's going to trade up or trade down. So from that standpoint, correct. But I would say that Anthony Patch is a little bit. You can't compare him to, say, Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel, who had higher roles and were technically the number two under Howie, because those guys were not with the organization for 23 years. And those guys weren't really there with Howie during his tough moments earlier in his career. And then, of course, during the Chip Kelly banishment time. And Anthony Patch was. And Anthony and Howie and the owner, Jeffrey Lurie, they've been together a long time. They have a very good rapport. And it makes it different because it's hard to say unless you really understand or know, but everybody has like that guy who, it doesn't matter what the title is, that's your ride or die guy, right? And that wasn't, he had good relationships with Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel, but again, Anthony was the guy who's been there the longest, even before Howie was GM, and they've been together for a really long time, to the point where, the Eagles have like three different guys with this college scouting director title. At one point, they had an assistant director of college scouting, a director of college scouting, and a senior director of college scouting. Now, that's changed, and they're not going to continue to do that going forward. But Anthony was the senior director of college scouting, and they just felt like he needed to be the presence and the loudest voice of those college scouts, and he was very reliable. I'm not saying that the Eagles can't be a good team going forward. They certainly have had front office in place, but the point of the story and the message is this is a really a guy who's been really important to Howie Roseman throughout his career.
Yeah, I guess the one question would be is, okay, if he's been around here for so long, how come he didn't have a higher presence or a bigger title or something to that effect?
Yeah, there's some advantages to being in a position where you make pretty good money, you're rewarded with the team, but you're also allowed to work from he lives in Washington State, all the way across the country. He's a field guy. He likes to be out, likes to be, doing his scouting thing, which is going to campuses, getting to know coaches, getting to know the player. That's why they've been good. His scouting reports are, from what I understand, are always really good and thorough because he's out there doing that field work. If you're the assistant GM, you now become responsible for a whole lot of other things that maybe you just don't love doing. So we've all seen this, and some people are really happy with what they do and their job, and it's really not important for them to have a better title with more money if it means that they're doing something that's outside of their comfort zone. And I think that would probably best describe the situation here, where Anthony, he was doing what he liked to do the most. And even in Las Vegas now, you can see he's not doing anything different. He's a senior personnel executive, as I understand it, and it's going to be college scouting to the max for him.
Okay, Geoff Mosher, Philly Voice, Inside the Birds podcast, of course, Football at 4. Did you watch the Unscripted yet? Have you seen that from the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have not. I've heard a lot about it. But
okay, that's good, though. It's good because I want to get your take on this. Are you surprised? Because it seems that it is now clear that they were trying to trade up to 22 to get Campbell. Is that a surprise to you?
No, I didn't Howie even say. I think that there were some reports about that.
Well, there was some insinuation that they tried to trade up to 22, but I'm thinking, okay, were they trying to trade up to 22 to get this guy, or was there somebody like they got him at 31? They were trying to move up to 22. It is now pretty clear to get him because there's a scene in the show where Lori says, "Hey, we've been trying to get you for an hour here," and it shows him on the phone with the Chargers, with the Vikings, with a couple of, there's like 5 or 6 teams that he's trying to trade with, and they're all saying, no, no. Hey, buddy, you want to move back with me? They're like, no. Then they finally get him at 31. But the day after when there was like, hey, they tried to move up, I'm thinking they tried to go up to 22 to get a guy they got at 31. That's a pretty big coup for them.
Yeah, it is. And, once we had said before the draft, when you had asked us whether it was me or Adam, we said if they're going to move way, way up, it would be to get a guy like Walter Nolan, who we know they love, but he was gone by 16, which we also said was going to be the likely scenario that he'd be too far up to get. So, listen, I don't think Howie was lying. I think he was being very honest, and I know he was based on my own intel, that they had Campbell rated as a top 10 prospect. So even after Nolan's gone, they still have a guy on their board in the top 10 as the draft now gets to 19, 20, 21. And obviously with the Packers on the clock at 23, the Packers are an organization that is not afraid to use a first or a second round pick, high second round pick on an inside linebacker. They never have been, especially one who's a hybrid, right? They've had those hybrid type players in the past. Clay Matthews comes to mind.
Yeah.
Well, it was quite a while ago. So it made sense that they would want to get to 22. And because right after the Packers was the Vikings, and we know that Brian Flores plays a lot of multiple fronts and uses Van Ginkel, right, who's with the Vikings now, in a way that Vic plans to use Campbell. So that made that seemed like the safe spot to if you were going to get Campbell to go. And sometimes they say, Mike, the best trades are the ones you never make.
Don't make. Well, it's funny too because there's a moment in there where he looks at Jeffrey. He's like, Jeffrey, I'm trying, man. I'm trying. Nobody wants to make the trade. And then he trolls Adam Peters from Washington. He's like, hey, buddy, you want to move back? And he's like, no. And there's a division tax on you now. Like, he's like, oh, we tried to make a trade. We traded with them last year, and I don't think they liked the results of that trade, so they backed off. But they end up getting him at that pick. The other part, there was 2 other things that I want to bring up from that show and get your take on, is I don't know what this means, but when the Eagles took Andrew Makuba, the guy who was the happiest man in that room, and it wasn't close, was Vic Fangio. I mean, he was like, hey, yeah, I got this guy. Like, that to me, like, look at it, because this is a guy who's pretty stoic, doesn't show a lot of emotion. He was pumped to get Makuba.
What do you think Sidney Brown felt when he was watching Unscripted?
Good point. Good point. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it kind of goes back to the conversation we had the day, I guess the Monday after is the last time I was on with you from the draft standpoint. And there's an obvious fit to what Drew Makuba does and what Vic Fangio does as far as back-end versatility and being able to roll your safeties up and down and move them in nickel and try to confuse quarterbacks with what back end of a defensive structure you're playing, because you're constantly changing that look after the snap, which it's harder for the quarterback to process. Like, the quarterback knows something's going to change, but he may not know how it's going to change. And with Sidney Brown in there, who's really more of a box safety than anything, there's only so much you can do to confuse the quarterback on where Sidney Brown's going to be on any given snap compared to what they believe Drew Makuba can do. So that's why I think you saw Vic be pretty happy about that, because that's honestly the bread and butter of what Vic Fangio does. We know he's not going to blitz a lot. His whole thing is, how can I make life different on the quarterback by showing the quarterback a different picture?
The third thing, and I think Jimmy Kempski over at Philly Voice wrote about this today, and it's what stood out to me. Yes, and I'm glad because you retweeted this, and I said, oh, Jimmy, what stood out to me also stood out to Jimmy, who covers the Eagles for Philly Voice, which is the day 3 approach. When Howie, we played the audio earlier. It was the one thing from the show. I came in this morning. I was like, I got to get that bite because it really stood out to me. And it's him basically saying, here is what Howie Roseman says.
So we have this opportunity to get guys who will affect the team. And in 2018, we had 1 first-day pick. And then we came back on the third day, and in the fourth round, we drafted Avonte Maddox and Josh Sweat. We drafted Matt Pryor, and we drafted Jordan Mailata. That was an unbelievable draft. So the draft starts right now. So what we're going to do today is we are going to find the right guys for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's going to go with the right players, with the right tools in their body and the right mindset.
So he said, we want to find starters is something that he said. You know, a lot of people think third day, depth, try to find, and he's saying no. Our philosophy is we want to find starters. The draft starts right now. And I think that is a big reason why the Eagles have been so successful late in the draft.
Yeah, Jimmy wrote a really good story about this on phillyvoice.com that you were mentioning, and he had some nuggets in there that everybody should really check out because it's a deeper
Not
story
Nick's Nuggets, Harry.
No, not Nick's Nuggets, not Knicks versus Nuggets. You all confused. But the overriding point is that, and you've seen it work for them in the past, the Eagles are very traits heavy in the third round. They're also heavy on guys who may have had an injury at some point, and they are expecting back to full strength. There'll be a different player that, made them either a second round or a first round. They like to get guys who fell through the cracks, like Moro Ajomo. When they picked Moro Ajomo in the seventh round, the teams I spoke to were like, man, we didn't think he would be around in the seventh round. And of course, I'd be like, well, then why didn't you guys take him? But they're good with that, and then they're not afraid to take some uncanny or unconventional risks like Jordan Mailata, which worked out. Why? Because Jordan Mailata had great traits. Now, he'd never played down a football in his life, but he had great traits, great athleticism, and they have Jeff Stoutland. That's not going to work out every single time on day three. But again, if you get a few hits, then you're golden because nobody expects your day three guys to hit at all. Kyle McCord's a good example. He doesn't have athletic traits, right, compared to, say, even Will Howard, who went 2 picks later, who's a better athlete. But he's a very accurate quarterback, and he led the FBS in passing and attempts. Like, he threw the ball all over the place. There's really not too much wrong with him. It's just that nowadays everybody wants the athlete that can run around and throw like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, but he's merely your conventional pocket quarterback who has a few mechanicals to clean up, but you could really get something good out of that, a future number 2 quarterback if need be.
I also like the they showed in there, they went around the room to every scout and for them to kind of tout their guy. And I think obviously they allowed the scout who touted the guy they ended up picking. Like, that was the guy where they cut. They're like, hey, who's but Howie's like, okay, give me a center. And he points at the scout. Give me a center. Hey, I like Kendall, blah, 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 blah. Hey, give me a linebacker. Smile Munden. I think the scout said they think he's a 3-down starting linebacker in this league.
That's what that scout said, yeah. Which, I mean, he's pretty light, Smile Munden. I think he's around 220, which is okay because the league is getting there. But so that's another example of you ordinarily each year you have a lot of inside linebackers. There's so many of them that come out.
I'm glad you brought this up because that's what we were talking about right before you came on. Is have the Eagles shown that they now have put a higher value on that position?
I'm not sure. A little bit because obviously they took a guy who's going to play some off-ball linebacker in the draft. But if he wasn't also someone they felt could rush the passer from the edges, I'm not sure. Like, I'm trying to think of a different inside linebacker, like a Luke Kuechly type. He was just a great inside linebacker. I'm not sure the Eagles would take that kind of guy still in the first round, but we'll see. We'll see if the Vic Fangio has changed how they feel. My point was just that there are so many inside linebackers each year that it's smart of the Eagles to get them on day 3 because a lot of times they either test really well, like Mondon did, or they're like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. There's something mildly deficient like size or speed in Jeremiah Trotter Jr.'s case, but the guy's played inside linebacker his whole life and his instincts are great and the bloodlines are there. And again, it's a position where there'll be so many that you can get yourself a starter. It doesn't have to be an all-pro, doesn't have to be a Pro Bowl player, but like this scout was saying, if he's a starting 3-down linebacker in the NFL, bam, throw him. You can get him on day 3.
While you say that, Jeff in Summers Point chimes in with a question. Says, guys, what happens to Trotter Jr.? Thought he had a pretty good rookie year, but this offseason he went under the radar. Is he going to be used? Now, I would say he barely played. He didn't get very much time on defense anyway.
No, he did not, but he will be right in the mix with Jihad Campbell to start at opposite Zach Bond for at least the first 5-6 weeks of the season while Nakobe Dean is coming back from an injury. So you can't rule him out at all. Vic Fangio likes him. The organization likes him. They're very high on him. We'll see what their actions are with Nakobe Dean once Nakobe Dean comes back and plays, and whether or not there's an extension in his future. If not, you can pretty much, make the summarization that they probably didn't think he'd stay healthy for the long term. And they have a guy like Trotter Jr. and Jihad Campbell who they feel can play across from Zach Bond. And by the way, Zach Bond signed a 3-year deal, not an 8-year deal, right? So there's still plenty of time ahead for Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to do something for this team.
All right, so good question there. And we'll do some more Mosher mailbags here as we get into the summertime. Real quick, give me I know the rookie mini camps don't give you anything. I know Andrew wrote a piece about the undrafted rookie free agents. Is there any guys in that group that you are going to be keeping an eye on when they get to training camp?
Yeah, I think Andrew really nailed it on InsideTheBirds.com with his story on him, because he didn't go through every single one. He just said, here are the guys that I think got a shot. And while he was doing that, Adam and I were working the phones also. I have a funny story. I said it in the podcast real quick. I sent the list of Eagles undrafted free agents to a personnel guy I know from a different NFL team and asked, does anybody jump out? And the response I got back was, hey, I really love the Ty Robinson pick in the 4th round. And I said, well, that's really good, but that does not answer the question. And I almost felt like that's his way of saying, why are we even talking about this class of UDFAs? But that's the case for every NFL team. These guys don't get drafted for a reason. But it is good to know that this guy liked Ty Robinson and thought that he was a 3rd round pick, not a 4th, where the Eagles got him. So that's good. But the guy that, to me, really jumps out is the Rutgers offensive tackle, Holland Pierce, because he's 6'8". He's 340 pounds. He has an 88-inch wingspan. I mean, this is a guy. I always joke about the long arm guys. They can scratch their knees without bending over. I think this guy can clip his toenails without bending over. So, I mean, whenever you have that kind of length and body, he's not a great athlete, but if Geoff Stoutland can get him to play at like backup offensive line level, then maybe you got a backup tackle who can be molded into something better. Who knows?
Well, let me tell you, Stoutland was thrilled with Hinton that he got him, and then Howie says, all right, we're going to draft Cam Robinson. I mean, and Stoutland was like, yeah, I got another guy. He was thrilled. Cam Williams.
Yes. Yes.
So good stuff. Watch that thing there. It was really insightful, I think, and it's funny because you're seeing Howie working the phones, and everybody just saying, nope, not working with you. Nope, not working with you. But good stuff. All right, Geoff Mosher from Philly Voice.
Mike, the funny part is you've been saying this you've been beating this drum. Why does anybody pick up the phone when Howie Roseman calls? Because he's considered the king of the fleece. Well, guess what? They're picking up the phone now, but they're basically hanging up on him in the middle of a sentence.
Well, he did say, because he's like, there was a trade, and Atlanta gave up a 1st-round pick next year. And he's like, right. Now I know why no one's taking my offers. Geoff Mosher, Philly Voice. And, of course, he's not leaving Inside the Birds. They're still pumping out material. You can check out ITB on all platforms, the Inside the Birds podcast, and right here on Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Moshe, thanks, buddy.
Take care, Mike.